Okay, so yesterday we learned that 180 degrees is the same as pi radians. So we were able to write two ratios, 180 degrees over pi radians, and we could write pi radians over 180 degrees. And we looked at going from degrees to radians. Today we're going to go from radians to degrees. Yay. Woo. Okay. So let's just start with a practice problem. So how many degrees are in, let's do, let's do 3 pi over 4 radians. Okay, so we are going to do the same thing that we did yesterday. You set up a ratio. So you have a fraction bar, an equal sign, a fraction bar. What you are trying to find goes on the top. So find goes on the top. And we are trying to find degrees, which, okay, if you're trying to find anything, we're just going to call that x. What you know goes on the bottom, and we know 3 pi over 4 radians. So I'm going to write 3 pi over 4 radians. Okay, so then you have to figure out which one of these two things is going to go here. So it's the same thing as yesterday, but now we have radians in the bottom. So if we have radians in the denominator, you have to have radians in the denominator over here. So which one of these has radians in the bottom? Well, that would be pi radians, so the first one. So we can write pi radians. And then we were trying to find degrees, which is in the top, so you have to have degrees on the top. So that's 180 degrees. Okay, so we are trying to solve for x. So we need to multiply both sides by this. So I'm going to rewrite this. So we have pi over 3 pi over 4 radians equals 180 degrees over pi radians. So I'm going to multiply this side by 3 pi over 4 radians. So what was the purpose of multiplying by 3 pi over 4 radians? Well, these two things are going to cross out. All of this is going to cross out. And then I need to multiply this side by 3 pi over 4 radians. Okay, so now we're going to do the same thing we did yesterday. We're going to simplify before we actually multiply. So, oh, how convenient. We have a pi in the numerator and in the denominator. Those can cross out. We have radians and radians, so those go away. That's just your label. So this label went with this top, this label went with this pi. And then 3/4 we cannot simplify, but we can simplify 180 over 4. So if you take 180 divided by 4, you're going to end up with 45. So this crosses out and becomes a 45. This crosses out and becomes a nothing, so just a 1. And let's write what we have left. So we have a 45 on the top, so 45. We have times 3 over, that's crossed out, that's a 1, so I could put this over 1 if I really wanted. And x is going to equal 45 times 3 over 1. 45 and 45 is 90, so that is going to be 135 degrees. Okay, let's try another one. This time let's try, let's see. How many degrees are in, let's do 2 pi over 5 radians. So this time I'm going to try to, I'll separate my work a little more and not cross everything out like a crazy woman. So you set up your ratio, fraction bar, equal sign fraction bar. What you want to find goes in the top left. What you know goes in the bottom left. So 2 pi over 5 radians. Radians are on the bottom, so you have to have radians in the bottom. So that would be pi radians. And then on the top, you're going to have 180 degrees. So I need to multiply both sides by 2 pi over 5, multiply by 2 pi over 5. These two things cross out completely. So you're left with x equals, okay, so the pi's, oops, I forgot my radians again. I'm really bad at labels, sorry. So we can see that the pi and the radians cross out, so pi and radians. So I have left 180 degrees times 2. And then just on the bottom you have 5. So this was over 5. 2 over 5 does not simplify, but 180 and 5 do. So as long as it's something in the numerator and the denominator, you can simplify them. So 180 divided by 5 is 36. So this crosses out, becomes a 36. Divide that by 5, you get a 1. So you get x equals 72 degrees. Okay, we'll try one more. Let's do, how many degrees are in, I'm going to try to do a more challenging one, but let's do 3 pi over, I don't know, 10. Okay, so you set radians. So you set up your ratio, equal sign, fraction bar, x goes on the top, what you know goes on the bottom. So 3 pi over 10 radians. Radians has to go on the bottom, so that's pi radians. Degrees has to go on the top, so it's 180 degrees. Multiply both sides by this denominator. So 3 pi over 10. 3 pi over 10. So these all cross out. You're left with x equals, okay, so over here, cross out the pi's and the radians. So I'm left with 180 times 3 over 10. 3 over 10 doesn't simplify, but 180 over 10 does. If I divide 180 over 10, I get 18. So this is going to be x equals 18 times 3, and 18 times 3 is 54. So x equals 54 degrees. Oops, sorry. All right, that's all I have. So you have to finish your IXL link from yesterday and get to an 85. If you have questions between now and then, make sure you ask.